Galway on a summer night was buzzing with energy. The air felt electric with the sound of laughter and the movement of young people through the streets. As the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Sarah O'Connor, still adjusting to the environment, felt part of the energy but also a bit out of place. Something inside her pulsed with expectation, a feeling that the night held something unexpected. When her eyes met Michael Gallagher's for the first time, the world around them seemed to fade away for a moment. Michael, never one to believe in fated encounters, felt a strange connection upon seeing Sarah. It was as if, without saying a word, something deep was shared between them, an invisible force pulling them inevitably toward each other. He watched closely the way she moved, her hair swaying in the wind, and his heart raced. Both surrounded by friends, but something about that moment made time slow down. The hours of the party passed, but that specific moment would be forever etched in their memories. The night carried on with the carefree atmosphere of a celebration, and Sarah found herself relaxed, enjoying the upbeat rhythm. The lights twinkled in the distance, and she felt wrapped in the soft sea breeze blowing from the banks of the river Corrib. The music seemed like a distant murmur, as if it only echoed inside her. As the night progressed, she noticed Michael at various points from afar. Though they were physically distant, something in the way their eyes repeatedly met stirred feelings inside her that she could hardly name. Sarah's emotions fluctuated between curiosity and something deeper, still vaguely forming in her heart. There was something intriguing about Michael's presence, a quiet sense of security that attracted her in an inexplicable way. Galway, which until then had been just a place, began to take on more vivid colors, as if the very landscape was transforming before her eyes, a reflection of the confusion of emotions that were emerging. The impact of that night was greater than either of them could have imagined. For Michael, the memory of Sarah would follow him in the days to come, like a persistent shadow in his thoughts. For Sarah, the feeling was subtler, like a seed had been planted in her chest. It wasn't just physical attraction or the excitement of youth. There was an inexplicable depth to what they both felt, as if something much greater was about to unfold. By the end of the night, fate seemed to have already whispered its plans. The wind carried unspoken promises as the crowd dispersed. The party had ended, but the feeling between them had only just begun. Each step they took toward saying goodbye carried a quiet expectation, an unspoken understanding that their paths would somehow cross again. The universe seemed to conspire, in subtle ways, to ensure that what had begun that night would not simply be forgotten with the dawn. Summer in Galway seemed more vibrant as the days passed, and Sarah and Michael quickly became inseparable. Mornings were filled with walks through the city's narrow, colorful streets, and afternoons with long picnics in the green hills that stretched beyond the river Corrib. It felt as if the world was theirs, as if time had been suspended, allowing each moment to be lived with intensity. Sarah's laughter echoed in the air, and Michael watched her with growing admiration, feeling as though his life had changed in a way that could never be undone. The weeks that followed were marked by a youthful happiness, something they both felt for the first time. The future seemed bright, and worries were distant. Sarah found herself more and more drawn to Michael, not just because of his charm, but because of the way he seemed to understand her ambitions, her fears, and her dreams. He listened to her with a kind of attention that made her feel important, as if nothing else in the world mattered as much as the words she spoke. In return, she discovered Michael's more vulnerable side, his hopes and deepest desires. Galway, with its breathtaking landscapes, was the perfect backdrop for this young and intense love. Afternoons spent together by the sea or among the hills were moments of peace, where only the sound of the waves or the wind in the trees accompanied them. Michael took her to his favorite places, small corners of the city where he had spent his childhood. For Sarah, it felt like a privilege, being guided through Michael's past as they built a new future together. The love between them grew in an overwhelming way, as if nothing could separate them. Sarah, a generous-hearted young woman, could no longer imagine a day without Michael by her side. She believed that what she felt for him was rare, almost otherworldly. Every touch, every shared glance seemed loaded with profound meaning. Michael, in turn, felt an even deeper connection to her, as if Sarah embodied all the things he desired for the future. A simple, fulfilling life with someone who truly understood him. Amid the walks, there were also moments of silence, where neither of them needed to speak. Sarah would get lost in thoughts about what the future might hold. There was a faint anxiety in her heart, because even in the happiest moments, part of her feared that something might burst the bubble of happiness they were living in. She wondered if love would always be this easy, this light, or if, like everything in life, it would face challenges. But at that time, those worries seemed distant, like passing clouds that would never reach them. Galway was a sanctuary, where time seemed to follow its own rhythm, and the love between Sarah and Michael grew as naturally as the landscape around them. They were young, in love, and believed the world was within their reach. The arrival of autumn brought with it a different kind of lightness. The colors of the leaves were changing, and the still mild weather seemed perfect for the next step Michael had been quietly planning. They continued their routines of walks and outings through the city, but that late afternoon by the sea felt special, as if Galway, in all its natural beauty, was whispering something in the winds. Sarah, unaware of what was coming, watched the waves crashing against the rocks, feeling the warmth of Michael's presence beside her. He, however, was deep in thought, reflecting on the exact moment when he would ask the question that would change their lives. Michael knew that what he had with Sarah was more than a fleeting passion. The weeks they had spent together had shown him that she was not just the woman with whom he wanted to share the joyful days of his youth, but the person with whom he wanted to grow old. He felt a deep security in his heart, something he had never experienced before. The wind, filled with the salty smell of the sea, blew softly, and he decided that this was the moment. The setting was perfect, and the love he felt seemed as vast as the ocean stretching out before them. Sarah, distracted by the view, felt an unusual calm. The connection between them seemed to deepen with each passing day, but she had no idea that such a significant change was about to take place. Their recent conversations, filled with dreams about the future, were brimming with hope. She dreamed of living a simple life with Michael, far from the complications and pressures that the world imposed. The simplicity of that moment reflected exactly what she had always wanted, the peace that can only be found when you're with the right person. Suddenly, Michael knelt down on the cold sand. Sarah, surprised, quickly turned and met his eyes, now filled with a determination she had never seen before. He held her hand firmly, and in silence, the moment spoke for itself. No words were necessary for her to understand the depth of his gesture. Sarah's heart raced, and she felt as if the weight of life lifted for a moment. Deep down, she already knew the answer. In the quiet that surrounded them, Sarah's mind briefly traveled through everything they had experienced up to that point. Every little detail, every shared smile, every touch seemed to have led to this moment. The decision was not difficult. Michael represented security, love, and above all, a partnership that she knew would last. The promise between them was something greater than any obstacle they could face. That simple yet powerful gesture was the culmination of everything they had felt since the moment they met. In that instant, by the ocean, surrounded by the vastness of the waters and the sky tinged with orange, Michael and Sarah were finally in harmony with the future that awaited them. The soft wind seemed to blow a quiet blessing, while the infinite horizon reflected the beginning of a new journey. A life together was beginning to take shape, and they both knew that, from that moment on, their souls would be intertwined forever. The love that once seemed invincible began to show its first cracks as time passed. The intensity of their relationship, which once bound them so tightly, now brought with it unexpected insecurities and conflicts. Sarah, naturally confident and determined, began to notice small changes in Michael. His previously secure behavior was now marked by jealousy, which, although subtle at first, began to emerge more frequently. Small comments, silent looks of distrust, and arguments over things that once seemed insignificant became common. The unease between them grew during tense moments, and the deep feelings they shared no longer seemed enough to smooth over the differences. The light and peaceful atmosphere that had enveloped them in the beginning started to dissipate, giving way to a minefield of unresolved emotions. Sarah, caught between the love she still felt and the growing discomfort, tried to remain calm and find a solution. But there was something deeply troubling her, the pride that both carried. Neither was willing to give in, to admit their fears or the fragility that was beginning to take hold of their hearts. The fights became more frequent and more painful. Michael's jealousy, fed by insecurities and misunderstandings, intensified each day. Sarah, for her part, could no longer hide how much it affected her. She felt suffocated, trapped in an endless cycle of arguments. The love still existed, of course, but it felt as if it had been buried under layers of resentment and unresolved hurt. In her moments of silence, she wondered when everything had changed, and how something that once seemed so perfect could be on the verge of falling apart. The argument that led to their breakup happened on an afternoon that seemed ordinary, but was filled with tension. What started as a trivial disagreement quickly escalated into an explosion of repressed emotions. The frustration that had been building up for so long finally overflowed, leaving them both exhausted and emotionally wounded. Pride and stubbornness, traits that once seemed harmless, now built impenetrable walls between them. The silence that followed the argument was even more devastating than the harsh words exchanged. The decision to part ways, though not explicitly stated, hung in the air. Both knew that, despite the love they still felt, the relationship had reached a breaking point. The sense of loss was immense, but pride prevented either of them from taking the first step to repair the damage. Separation seemed inevitable, and the pain of leaving behind what they had built was something they would both carry for a long time. When Sarah finally left Galway and moved to Dublin, the emptiness was unbearable. She carried with her the memories of a love that had once seemed eternal, but was now slipping through her fingers like sand. Michael, for his part, remained in the city, trying to rebuild what was left of his life. They both went their separate ways, but the scars of that breakup would follow them for many years to come. The distance between Sarah and Michael became not just physical but emotional as the years stretched on. Sarah had moved to Dublin, where her life took an unexpected turn. Shortly after the breakup, she plunged into a marriage that, at first glance, seemed to offer the stability she craved. However, it quickly became clear that this new life would not bring the happiness she sought. The relationship was lukewarm, and the love that should have been the foundation of their union never flourished. The divorce came as a bitter inevitability, leaving Sarah with a sense of emptiness that time seemed unable to fill. Michael, on the other hand, stayed in Galway, where he tried to move on. He too got married, perhaps in an attempt to forget what he had lost, to find peace with someone else. But like Sarah, his attempt to rebuild his life in new arms failed. Divorce came for him as well, bringing not only the pain of a second failure, but also the constant reminder that true love had slipped from his grasp once before. Galway, which had once been the scene of his happiness, became a place filled with painful memories, and the city stood as a silent witness to what he had lost. During those years, both tried to focus on other aspects of their lives. Careers were built, friendships nurtured, and trips planned. But no matter how much they moved forward, the presence of the other never fully left them. There was always a shadow in their memories, a void in their achievements, as if something essential had been left behind. Sarah, now alone in Dublin, lived a comfortable life but never stopped thinking about how things could have been different. What would have happened if she and Michael had fought harder for their relationship? These questions echoed silently in her thoughts. Michael, in turn, often found himself walking through the streets of Galway, recalling the days he had spent with Sarah. Every corner, every cafe they used to visit, carried a memory. Life went on, of course, but he never managed to shake the feeling that he had lost something irretrievable. The scars of his failed marriage kept him tied to the past, but it was Sarah who, even after so long, occupied his deepest thoughts. Both faced life's challenges in different ways, but with the same persistent sense that the love they had shared had never truly been overcome. Time, which many believe can heal all wounds, only softened the pain. The years passed, but the memories remained as vivid as the first day. In moments of solitude, both wondered if fate would ever allow them to correct what they had lost. And so they continued their parallel lives, always distant but emotionally intertwined by something greater than time or distance. Until one day, fate finally gave a sign that its work was not yet finished. 35 years had passed since Sarah and Michael's last meeting, but life, with its unpredictable twists, seemed to have other plans for them. What began as a simple birthday celebration of a mutual friend turned into a turning point that neither Sarah nor Michael could have foreseen. The gathering, in a cozy house filled with familiar faces, brought up memories that Sarah thought had long been buried. As she reconnected with old friends, Michael's name came up casually in conversation, and the impact was immediate. Though Sarah didn't show it, a dormant feeling reignited in her chest. Amidst the laughter and shared memories, a niece of Sarah, who was at the event, mentioned, without much thought, that she had Michael's sister's contact information. Sarah's curiosity, always hidden beneath a facade of indifference, slowly reawakened. Life had gone on, but the invisible thread connecting her to Michael had never fully broken. What seemed like a simple gesture, a passing along of numbers, became a catalyst for something much larger. That night, Sarah went home with a strange sense of expectation, as if something important was about to happen. Meanwhile, in Galway, Michael lived his days with the same quiet melancholy that had followed him for years. Life had turned into a predictable routine, marked by work and solitude. He had never truly left Galway, neither emotionally nor physically, and the weight of memories followed him constantly. However, when his sister, in a casual conversation, mentioned that she had gotten Sarah's contact information, everything changed. The initial shock was followed by a whirlwind of emotions he had spent decades trying to suppress. The past, which he thought had been buried, was back, and with it came the feeling that there might be a second chance. The next morning, something that seemed impossible happened. Sarah's phone rang, and when she answered, her heart stopped for a moment. The voice on the other end of the line was unmistakable, bringing back a flood of emotions she thought she had overcome. It was as if time hadn't passed, as if all the barriers that had separated them for so long were irrelevant. The sound of that voice awakened something deep within Sarah. A feeling she hadn't known was still there. The connection between them, once extinguished, reignited with a quiet yet undeniable intensity. The conversation that followed was brief, but its impact reverberated for days. For Sarah, life took on a new color. The past, which had so often seemed like an open wound, now felt like an opportunity. Michael, for his part, was filled with a renewed energy, a determination he hadn't felt in a long time. Both knew that fate, in some way, had given them a second chance. The question that remained was what they would do with it. And so, after years of separation and different paths, the thread that connected them was stronger than ever. Fate had intervened in an unexpected way, bringing back the possibility of a reunion that could change everything. For Sarah and Michael, the choice to follow this new path was about to be made. Michael's journey to Cork was made with a quiet determination, though his heart was racing. As the road wound through the green fields and the horizon opened before him, thoughts of what was about to happen swirled in his mind. He had abandoned the stable life he had built in Dublin, leaving behind not only his job, but also the political ambitions that had once consumed him. There was something more urgent now, the need to mend what time had broken. The Irish landscape, with its rolling hills and the distant sparkle of the Atlantic, reflected the calm he hoped to find upon seeing Sarah again. But inside him, an emotional storm was brewing. Sarah, for her part, also felt the weight of the moment that was approaching. The phone call had been just the beginning. Since then, she had spent her days trying to prepare for the moment when she would see the man who, despite all the twists life had taken, had never truly left her heart. The city of Cork, with its old streets and the constant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs, seemed like the perfect place for this reunion. There was something serene about the atmosphere, something that calmed her nerves, but the mix of anxiety and expectation was undeniable. The moment their eyes finally met again was overwhelming. Decades had passed, but the connection they had felt in Galway so many years ago had not weakened. Upon seeing each other, time seemed to evaporate. The weight of all the years, the mistakes, the pain, and the distance dissolved in that instant. The scars of their individual lives were still there, but now, standing before one another, there was a sense of redemption. Michael looked at Sarah with the same intensity as before, but now with a deeper understanding, an acceptance of everything they had been through. The nature of the reunion was not just physical, it was an emotional rediscovery. Both knew they were no longer the young people who once believed love could conquer all. They were different, shaped by life's experiences, but that did not diminish the impact of the moment. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions: joy, relief, fear of the unknown. Michael's face, though older and more worn, still reflected the man she had fallen in love with. She saw not only the marks of time but also the steadiness of someone who, despite everything, still carried the same essence. That moment did not bring immediate promises or words of reconciliation. The reunion was a mutual acknowledgement that, despite time, something had always remained alive between them. The painful memories and wrong decisions still existed, but now, standing before each other, what mattered was the present. The wind from Cork, carrying the scent of salt, wrapped around them, and in some way, it felt as if the moment was blessed. The reunion, more than an end to the distance, was a beginning, a new chance to explore what remained of that love. Michael and Sarah, together again, knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but the flame that had been rekindled was enough to guide them. Fate had given them this opportunity, and they were both ready to see where it would lead. Michael and Sarah's reunion, though quiet and filled with unspoken emotions, opened a new chapter in their lives. Now in Cork, the landscape around them seemed perfectly suited for the slow process of rebuilding that they were both willing to undertake. They began spending more time together, rediscovering what they had lost while also getting to know each other again as the people they had become. The scars left by the years of separation were still there, but instead of being barriers, they served as reminders of resilience and growth. The first days together were marked by a mix of nostalgia and uncertainty. Walks along the cliffs of Cork, with the cold wind and the distant sound of the sea, helped create an atmosphere of introspection. Their conversations were deep but careful, as each of them sought to understand the new dynamics of their relationship. It wasn't the same carefree and intense love of their youth. Now there was a calmness, an acceptance of what they had lost and what they could still build. Sarah felt that, for the first time in decades, there was room for hope in her heart. Michael, though still marked by the past, showed a commitment she had never seen before. The passion between them, once fueled by youth and impulsiveness, was now infused with mutual understanding and patience. They no longer needed to prove anything to each other. Both knew the value of what they had rediscovered. The time they spent together was often filled with silence, where their presence spoke louder than any words. These quiet moments, whether watching the sunset over the sea or sitting in front of a fireplace in silence, allowed the past to be left behind. The trust that had once been broken was slowly being restored. Each gesture, each shared look, reaffirmed that the love they had never truly left them. The trips they took around Ireland, exploring the fields and landscapes they had once dreamed of seeing together, became the thread that connected this new phase. It was as if the country itself, with its wild and timeless beauty, was witnessing the resurrection of what had once seemed lost. Conversations about the future, about the plans they could still make, came naturally but without hurry. And so, as the days turned into weeks, Michael and Sarah found themselves deeply rooted in each other once again. The journey of rediscovery was not without its challenges, but now there was a mutual understanding, a solid foundation on which they could build. The love that had survived distance and time was finally blossoming again, and the future seemed full of new possibilities. As the months passed, Sarah and Michael found a quiet rhythm in their new life together in Cork. The house they had chosen, nestled in a rural area near the sea, was surrounded by vast green fields and the constant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs in the distance. There they began to build new memories, this time with the serenity that only maturity and experience can bring. There was peace in their simple routines, long walks on the beach, shared coffees in the morning, and nights warmed by the fireplace while the Irish wind howled outside. Their reconciliation wasn't marked by grand gestures or bold promises, but by a renewed intimacy, built slowly brick by brick on a foundation of trust. Both had come to understand that true love doesn't reside only in grand moments, but in the small details, in spontaneous gestures of affection, in silent support during tough days, and in mutual understanding that, despite everything, the journey had always been worth it. The time they had spent apart had taught them that love, while resilient, requires care, patience, and above all, presence. The old wounds were gradually replaced by a sense of gratitude. Every day together was seen as a gift, a chance to do what they hadn't been able to before. The mistakes of the past still existed in their memories, but they no longer carried the weight they once had. Instead, they were now reminders of lessons learned, starting points for something new. The lives they had lived during their separation, with their failed marriages and the challenges they faced, seemed like a long detour that had somehow brought them back to where they were always meant to be. Life in Cork, while peaceful, was not without its challenges. There were moments when the past still loomed, bringing back old insecurities or doubts. However, unlike before, they now knew how to handle these issues. Instead of allowing old wounds to reopen, they faced them together with a new maturity. Michael, who had once let jealousy corrode their relationship, was now more restrained, more aware of his emotions. Sarah, in turn, felt more secure in expressing her concerns, without fear of creating new distances. The future, which once seemed uncertain and full of lost possibilities, now appeared with unexpected clarity. Together, they began to make plans for trips, to explore places they had always dreamed of visiting. They also talked about simple things like planting a garden or adopting a dog, small projects that connected them to the present and gave them a renewed sense of purpose. The life they now shared was far from perfect, but it was the life they had chosen, and that was enough. The love between them, which had withstood the test of time, grew stronger with each passing day. The promise of a future together, finally free of the ghosts of the past, was the foundation on which they were building their new life. What had begun with a painful breakup had transformed into a second chance, an opportunity for Michael and Sarah to write the rest of their story together. The story of Sarah and Michael shows us that true love can withstand time, distance, and past mistakes. Even after decades of separation, they found a second chance to rebuild what seemed lost. This journey reminds us how often pride and fear can drive us away from something that can still be recovered. Their reunion reminds us that when there is love and willingness, there is always time to start again. If you enjoyed this emotional story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we post new videos, and of course, share this story with someone you believe can be inspired by Sarah and Michael's journey. After all, everyone deserves to believe in second chances.